Terry Rosemont, and Tim Tamur. I'm sure Shane and others will be joining us momentarily. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the August 13th meeting. It's been moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. RTA next. Mr. Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Shane did join us, okay. So we're gonna make an effort at making this a relatively short meeting because the conversations have really already occurred. But we wanted to update you and go over some of the pieces that still need to be solidified before the August 25 meeting. So right out of the chute, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Rick to go through the updated option 3, which basically incorporates the comments and direction that we received from the board at the 13th meeting. So, or the 15th meeting, excuse me. So Rick, with that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Issa, if you can bring up the option 3 draft. You've all got handouts in front of you. As usual, tried to condense this to 2 pages. I apologize for the small type that's been ongoing for the last several weeks. Highlighted the areas I'll be talking about, which capture the changes and or the direction we received following the board meeting. So right up front, and also this was kind of a follow-up to General Maxwell's presentation to this committee when we unveiled this, and then some refinements and discussions that this committee made as well. So right up front, the entire completion of RTA 1, including the new project definitions, that's been taken from the previous version, option 2, where we had really kind of embodied and captured all that, simply been cut and paste over into this one. We added 2 projects instead of 1 to show the importance and benefit to the region for the completion efforts. So the double asterisks where the additional funding is going to be necessary. So we highlighted the Tangerine Road Phase 2B project that you've heard me refer to on occasion here, which goes from Marana Tech Drive over to Dove Mountain. And then obviously the last section for Grant Road, what we refer to as stages 5 and 6, but here we're calling Fremont to Sparkman. So that's in there. Also, the revised total is at $495 million, which is what we'd all talked about and agreed to at the previous meeting and was associated with the option 2. I think General Maxwell had probably rounded that up to 5 and included the bike facilities as well. I'll hit more upon that here in a little bit, but this matches all the totals, highlights the remaining efforts, and highlights the scope change projects as well. Moving down then through the into the new roadway sub-element in here. These were some changes and revisions and modifications that came following the board meeting. Particularly the Sonoran corridor. Those of you that can remember all the way back approximately 3 years ago when we held the workshop down at the Abrams Center, the suggestion on this project was to actually put in their funding, providing for comp plan updates so that the jurisdictions could proceed with getting those incorporated, the Sonoran corridor folded into that, the EIS results into that. So then that could be utilized as the basis for any exactions when new zoning opportunities come in. So that was what everybody had agreed to at that time. I think the language kind of had gotten glossed over, simplified, but we may have lost that intent in talking with the original one that suggested that at Saurita, and also the board member from Saurita, and Shane Dilley as well, wanted to go back to that language, incorporate that. So that's been revised accordingly to capture that intent. Moore Road. My apologies. Before it said reconstruct interchange instead of constructed as a new one. So we've got that corrected in there so that that's a brand new facility. Same price tag, just clarified up that description to make it align with what's intended. If you go down to line number 12 or project number 12, I'm sorry. Hema Mine Road, I-19 to Nogales Highway. The town of Saurita, their board member had identified that they had some possible revisions they would like to propose on this one. It's a simplification of the project, still keeping the same in limits, but instead of a widening out for a full capacity improvement, it's more of a realignment operational modification out there. So we've incorporated that language in there. The maps had properly captured that there will be a realignment portion onto a new roadway at the east end to tie into a future intersection. We revised the language to make sure that that's commensurate with it. And then, of course, the price tag on that scope reduction has been incorporated as well, freeing up about $20 million. I'll talk more to that here in a minute. Moving down to 17 and 18. During the board meeting last Friday, both the Colossal Cave and Marianne Cleveland Way projects were identified, and the request was made to evaluate and consider if those could be possibly accelerated a period. As you recall, they've both been in the back half of the plan in periods 3 and 4, and there was a desire to be more responsive to that area of community in the region to see if those can be possibly brought up. Felt that periods 2 and 3 would be reasonable for both of those. So if you agree, that's where that modification has been made and how that feedback's been incorporated. You flip to the second page. Project number 29 is the new addition that came out of the board meeting as well. And this is for interchange improvements, particularly the widening of Sahuarita Road down on I-19. And essentially, there's widened sections on both the east end and west end of the interchange prism. So this project would then come in, widen it out as appropriate, and do an interchange reconstruction on there. Likely a new bridge, and then some ramp reconfigurations into whatever would make the most sense to address some safety concerns that have risen down there. Part of the $20 million savings from Pima Mine Road was rediverted to here in the form of 15, and then an accompanying $85 million of the RAC funds. Met briefly yesterday with ADOT and with Sahuarita to make sure the proper description was captured following the meeting with the mayor and town manager Friday. All parties agreed that a fourth period, kind of recognizing that we want to stagger those interchange configurations as they go through and the utilization of the RAC funds. So the fourth period was identified and acceptable to both parties on that as well. So you see the revised, I'm sorry, not the revised, you see the new description associated with it, $100 million price tag, fourth period with the breakout as laid out. I'll stop there on the roadway elements before I go into the next ones. Any questions? Because I know I flew through that fairly quickly. I can answer any questions or I can keep going, Madam Chair.
Tim?
Couple quick questions. Thank you, Madam Chair, for comments. One is with regard to grant 5 and 6 being listed here. I'd raised concern about that in previous TMC meetings. And while I understand what is being tried to achieve here with showing the dollars needed to complete RTA 1, I don't want to leave it unsaid that this is not set a precedent that in the event RTA Next does not pass, in no way is the city accepting the fact that grant 5 and 6 is at risk of not being completed. And we need to understand that dollars may need to be reprioritized. Existing dollars need to be reprioritized to complete as much work within the city as possible in the event that RTA Next does not pass. That's comment number one. Comment number two is just to confirm that grant 5-6 as shown as the original scope, or is it a revised scope?
Take a stab at answering at least the first one, and if then might need help on the second. So Tim, just so that we're clear and for the record, if the RTA Next is not successful at the ballot in March, my expectation would be we'd come back to the board and look at the entirety of the projects that are remaining and ensure that we comply with whatever direction we get. But obviously, that means a total look at all of the remaining pieces of the program. And so I would suggest to you that, again, if we're not successful, that we would bring that back and immediately start looking at all of those things, and that would be the time to really identify how we're going to complete the program. With regard to your second question, so this is the original scope. The one that we were talking about potentially rescoping is the grant UP, which is not necessarily not listed here yet. We do have a meeting that's scheduled for later this week with the Pasquayaki tribe and I think some of your folks as well, Tim, as well as some RTA folks to talk about potentially rescoping that. So I did want to draw your attention to the fact that's not on this list as a rescope project, but we will be having a conversation around, or we may, let me rephrase that, we may be having a conversation about including that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Shane, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? There we go.
Thank you. Yes, I got you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. So Rick, I know that we haven't gotten down a little bit further on this spreadsheet. There was calculated a $20 million savings on the Pima Mine Road, 15 of which is allocated here to the new TI at Sahuarita Road. So okay, so where did the balance of that 20 million go? Where's the extra 5 million? Can you just quickly identify? I know that's kind of cheating and going ahead of the book a little bit, but could you identify that for me real quick?
So the original proposal brought forth by General Maxwell had $500 million associated with all the completion activities on RTA current. And if you remember from our past discussions, we had identified 495 in the roadway element and then 10 million necessary for completion and fulfilling obligations and commitments associated primarily with bike facilities. So bring a total of 505. So that was going to lower the pavement pres amount by that amount respectively for the extra 5 million. So Shane, essentially the 5 million in additional savings and reduction from Pima Mine plugged right back into the arterial reconstruction section and brought that back up to whole. So sorry for the roundabout way, but essentially it went into the pavement rehabilitation to offset the extra 5 million that was not accounted for. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. Madam Chair, I would propose to the committee for consideration. As a region, we only allocated $5 million to the Sonoran corridor. We had, I mean, that number I think originally 3 years ago was upwards of 15 million. Might have been a little bit higher than that.
I think it was 20.
20.
It might have been 20. Okay, 20. That was a project that easily got sacrificed. But I think that it might be, cutting our nose off, spite our face a little bit on that. A little more vision on the part of this committee to advance or do what we can as a region to advance the work of that corridor makes a lot of sense to me. Would the committee be willing to consider that 5 million going instead of the rehabilitation category to bolster the Sonoran corridor? That's a project of regional significance. Clearly, it definitely impacts segments in the city of Tucson, the county, and the town of Sahuarita. And the reality is this: that if we don't have as a region what it takes to make that project a success, we're really planning to fail. And the sooner we can get the master streets and routes effort done, so that we have an actual map on the page, we can't really expect developers and landowners to know how best to advance their work as private landholders, and it just further complicates the reality of getting that project done. So, I would propose that maybe we take that 5 million and tuck it into that project, just to do what we can to advance it and to help it along the way. So, I just put that on the table for consideration, and I think that's that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not opposed to that type of idea, with the exception of not from the city of Tucson. And I'll explain why I'm drawing that line. First of all, when option 3 was first being shopped around before it got further modified and brought to the council, there was 236 million in arterial rehabilitation, which is down to 177. And of that, over 200 million was available to the city, which is now 139 million. And the city's percentage, which had at one point crested above 52%, is now dangerously close to falling back to 50. So I don't disagree with Mr. Dilly's thinking or logic. I would say if that can come from arterial rehabilitation from others besides the city of Tucson, then I would support it.
Rick, can that be accommodated?
Before I comment, Rick, just a quick question. Did you say that, I thought that the arterial reconstruction was at 177 to start with. Did you say you added 5 million to that?
So let me clarify. Yes, it's 177 all along. The general's plan, option 3, the original one, only had 500 million for the completion of RTA 1 instead of the 505 that we had long identified, simply a rounding error. So I needed to take that 5 from somewhere, but that was also offset then by Town of Sahuaritas. That was my suggestion. Essentially, it was a net wash.
Isn't that 495?
Yeah, I understand. I guess what I'm asking is the arterial reconstruction amount didn't change.
That's correct.
What you said originally, but you said a minute ago that you put,
It was an add and a subtract, or subtract and an add. So it's still at the 176 that he originally proposed from his last week.
okay, so there was no addition to that
No.
from General Maxwell's. Just kind of thinking about this, it seems to me that maybe the conversation, Shane, is looking at, so that's the first period. We should have a pretty good handle on revenues by the end of that first period. So in the first 5 years, what I would suggest is that if there's a recommendation, I'd be nervous about making a change now. But if the committee would like to recommend that that would be one of the projects that could be looked at or added, bolstered, if you will, with additional revenues in that first 5 years or even beyond, I think that could be accomplished, and we could make a note of that. That I'm just kind of thinking that through a minute here, because I think the impression that Rick gave was that extra quote 5 million went into the arterial rehabilitation when it really didn't. I think it was when General Maxwell's math was at 500 million. That's the 5 million that basically was taken out. So
Shane, I'll cut 1 sec. Shane, 1 sec. Oh, and help me understand, just because I've heard 500 and 505 to complete.
495.
It is the 495.
495
Okay,
for
good.
the roadway element with an additional 10 allocated for the bike facilities.
So that's the extra.
Okay, yeah,
That's why it's 505.
but that's not in the RTA finish up one.
Line 32 is in that particular element where that's always been separated out.
Thank you. Got it. Shane,
Thank you. I completely appreciate Tim's comments and suggestion. I would just note for the group, this project is prioritized in segments. $10 million is not going to take it very far, but its first priority is segment 1, which is the northern section, largely impacting the city of Tucson. I don't have any grand thoughts that I'm even going to see a part of that 10 million down in my neck of the woods. The spirit of my comment truly is just to do something to get this project on a map so that it makes it easier for us to manage land development over the years, and hopefully in such a way that gives this project the best chance possible to becoming reality for the region. So I just put that on the table. Thank you.
thank you. So, oh, what can we do today? If you're saying
So,
you can't make any modifications?
Well, Madam Chair, you can make all the modifications you all want. I'm just not recommending any. So here's the thought, Shane and Tim. Maybe a way to do this is if the TMC recommends that I'll say the funding for that be increased to 5 million or to 10 million, excuse me, as Shane suggested. what we could do is take that out of the first excess revenue and just put it there. And that could avoid having to make any changes to this right this second. And I think that we'll be able to settle up almost on a annual basis, and we should know fairly quick. And I think that could really solve that, in my opinion. And we'll know. And it could also be, by the way, an opportunity to see what is happening in that area where we could see a need for more, quite frankly. So that's just a thought.
Thank you. Tim?
I think the devil's in the details on this one, and the first excess revenue is the first get the city of Tucson to its 55% share, which the city of Tucson's taking all the risk of getting to 55%.
Do you need a motion, or we understand? Shane?
I would just, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Tim, I think the spirit of my recommendation is, in the nature of the programming for that project, in support of what you're saying. I think that when everything shakes down, this extra money is going to bolster a project that's within the city of Tucson, and I totally support that. I just, from a regional perspective, the Sonoran corridor is something that truly is regional in nature, more so than many of the projects listed, on our plan. So I think the spirit of my recommendation or suggestion is in support of bolstering where I believe Tim is wanting to go and in representing the city. Thank you.
I think Shane, you're right. I mean, we started at over 20 million. We've had this, I think at one point in some of the early discussions down at Abrams were several hundred million. And so it's been really skinny down quite a bit, and to look at 10 million for that. So John?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think the $5 million, I mean, maybe the description's a little bit off. I suspect that we won't find any money for right-of-way acquisition out of that first five, but we'll certainly be able to define, specifically the alignment, do what Shane needs for updating major streets and routes plan. That's a huge project, and it's going to take a lot of effort to get it moving in, some definitive way anyway. So I think 5 million is pretty good. Just define it as, planning design. Don't talk about right-of-way acquisition.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get to Tim. Thank you, Jason.
Madam Chair, and Mr. Ortega, regarding Grant Road, UPRR, in my conversations with chairman and staff at the casino, I believe there's 18.9 million that's in the project currently. I think that the tribe would not want to have it pushed out to as a rescope, and it calls for 6 lanes of traffic with bike and pedestrian facilities. And I think, Sam, you had asked the other day about our plans for Fairview. I think we have plans already that have been approved for Fairview. And the tribe would be open to constructing a bike path, dedicated bike path to go south on Fairview to reach to get to the pedestrian bicycle bridge that has been designed. So, thank you.
Madam Chair, Jason, thank you. So the reason I said that the Grant Road UP may show up on the rescoped is a function of the conversation we're going to have. I'm not advocating for a rescope necessarily, but what I want to make sure is if a rescope is necessary, that we include it here. And that conversation needs to happen this week. And I've been in contact with some of your folks, and we'll be having that discussion. But I just wanted to point out, and furthermore, I would not expect that to be delayed. So the spirit and intent of that is not to delay it, is to continue on the same schedule. But the conversation is really more about what the configuration of that is.
Another concern is the casino is scheduled to open October of next year. And so if there's any construction happening on Grant Road at the railroad tracks, that would be a big concern for the tribe. Thank you.
Madam Chair, it's highly unlikely that would not, that there wouldn't be construction going on at some point in the near future. We understand. I think the key will be first identifying and agreeing on a scope, whatever that looks like, then understanding or agreeing on whether it needs to be included in a conversation with the voter. And then third is coordinating with the tribe on the construction schedule. I think that's kind of fundamental. Let's figure out scope and then figure out the rest of those pieces afterward, Jason.
Tim?
Just to close out, Sonoran Corridor. At what point will we be coming to more definition of the revenues above pessimistic? Because we've got like one bold statement in there about 75-25 until we hit 55, and then 55-45 after that, which I think we're all in alignment with. But then we kind of talk about some other things that might, and how would that excess revenue be distributed into what elements? So what my question is, when would we be kind of refining that? And then a related question, when we talk about the ballot amount, and if it goes forward at the 2.7 million, is there a way to accommodate that first tranche of excess revenues up to baseline in a way that we have some certainty around that, versus that becomes something that has to go back to the voters or something that has to go through some other process? I know it's getting in the weeds there a little bit, but those are my two questions.
Go ahead. Yeah. I do want to catch, we're going, as we say, close out before we go on. I do, so if we can't touch it, I do think whatever you think is appropriate to take back to the board, that we are looking at the possibility. We would love to look at another 5 million for Sonoran Corridor, as we are looking at other possible elements, with the understanding that the city of Tucson wants to make sure it doesn't come out of theirs. But if we can look at other areas, we want to accommodate that additional thought.
So I guess if the management committee would like to recommend an additional 5 million to the Sonoran Corridor, then let's do that first, and then we'll figure out the rest of these pieces. The second piece, though, I think, Tim, is that language, and that's one of the topics I wanted to cover, was the language, that footnote that's at the end of the plan. My gut is that we should include that in the admin code, where we can get into a lot more detail on how that is, we'll call it, settled up on an annual basis. And what that does, Tim, is it gives an opportunity to get into specificity on where the dollars are allocated, how they could be allocated, and really goes into the level of detail, even up to and including the elements where those dollars could go. So I think that's an important conversation. Quite frankly, I think that is not really, I mean, it's clear, but it's not, in terms of some of the questions that you had. The second part of that, I think, is the flexibility language, which I think you're alluding to, in terms of what happens if we get significantly more, and what does that mean in terms of the overall program. I do have some language that we're going to include as a footnote. I'll hand that out in a little bit, which I think could address that. Or at least my expectation is it will address that. But we need to be very mindful that because of the statutory limitations, just because we get extra money doesn't mean we can spend it automatically. We've got to have a game plan. And I think that's your point, Tim, which I'm trying to build in, or we're trying to build in the flexibility, so that should we see an increase in revenue, that we have a mechanism by which we can spend that going forward.
And you said we may need it. So, and I just wanted to be clear, because some of it was moving the other way. What we have before us is identical to what was approved by the RTA board. There were no modifications at all.
Madam Chair, with the exception of what Rick outlined, the feedback, but it's feedback at the table from Saurita, We also included moving Macway and Colossal Cave up. That was feedback at the table. There was no other changes that we brought forth on our own. It's basically what was discussed at the table. You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. On the non-RTA contributions, I'd raised this previously when the jurisdictional contributions were increased by 10%. I noted that for Pima County, those amounts exceeded what the forecasts were in the most recent land use assumption and impact fee ordinance adopted by the board in July. So on Valencia Road, number 10, that's about 10% higher than what we forecasted in terms of impact fee revenues. Colossal Cave, number 17, looks like we're okay. But then number 18, Marianne Cleveland, exceeds what our forecast is. Same with number 21, Irvington Road. And then number 22, Orange Grove Road. So in those four instances, the amount shown here is greater than what we have forecasted in impact fee revenues in our latest impact fee ordinance adoption.
Thank you.
Okay, respond. Madam Chair, members of the committee, that's excellent, Carmine. Not that they're over, but that's exactly what this conversation is about, is to really look at all aspects of this plan, because this is the plan, right, that's going to go to the voter. And so before we leave here, what I will ask is that everyone look at not only the amounts, so not only the RTA budget, the non-RTA dollars, but also the descriptions, and make sure that those descriptions match what it is that you are comfortable with, so that we can make whatever modifications that we'll say the final polish on this to go to the board. And that has to happen today and tomorrow, because my plan is to get this back to the board by Thursday.
We've submitted all that, right?
So we raised it at a prior meeting and suggested that staff from RTA get together with Pima County staff. I think the ones are number 10 Valencia Road, 18 Marianne Cleveland, 21 Irvington, and 22 Orange Grove, where those amounts are
Give
higher.
a rough,
They're about 10, there was a 10% across the board increase to the non-RTA funds coming from the jurisdiction. So they're about 10% over.
20 million-ish, about 20 million off. Okay, Sam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have the same comment for project number 8, Drexel Road. That number looks a little bit higher. We'll confirm that amount and get that back to staff. Thank you.
Okay, and I think that's for all our jurisdictions, right? If take another quick look at all of the projects, what has been allocated for non-RTA, make sure that we're close. Well, don't make sure we're close. Tell us the accurate numbers, and then we'll see how far off we are that way. I'm gonna just, Shane, are you okay with just some of the discussion at the table moving forward and talking with your mayor about modifications at the RTA board for the Sonoran corridor?
I am, Madam Chair, and I think if I might formalize that request by the TMC, I do it in a motion at this point that we recommend an additional $5 million be allocated as a priority to the Sonoran corridor. From whence it comes, I think we can kind of hammer that thing out later, but I really do think that, we found it easy to sacrifice that project for obvious reasons, but I think it's short-sightedness on our part, as this project is of huge significance if we hope to manage our regional transportation needs effectively in the future. So thank you.
And that was a motion. Is there a second?
Second,
Terry, was that you?
it was indeed.
Okay, thank you. All right, good morning. Any additional discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay?
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Good. Thank you all very much. We'll look for $5 million.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Our work here is done.
Right.
That we've decreased the revenues for other sources, and we've increased
Yeah,
5 million, and we're 30 minutes in, so this is good. So John and Sam, did you?
Madam Chair, since
John?
Mike talked about this being the plan, the document,
Yeah.
I have a comment from Kurt, since he's not here. It's about the footnote at the very end where it talks about what this document is all about. And I think his comment really is suggesting that we be clear that the new 20-year RTA plan also includes addressing the significant change from RTA 1. And I don't know if you need to build that into that note somehow if you can, but and that's just Mr. Luke's suggestion.
Mr. Luke, wordsmither for the committee.
Of course.
And that's it. Thank you. And I will just comment, I have been working with county staff from elections and the recorder and other to make sure that I know exactly what it is we need by when. And Michael has asked that question to make sure we understand
I'll clean him
what
up.
we have to have on the ballot and what that looks like.
Sorry about that.
Specifically, and when we need what
Do
in.
it
So
in the morning.
we will be
Right.
working with, hopefully get that back to Mike today. That makes sense what you need. Okay, and then where did you want to go next?
Yeah,
in
so,
terms of that? Okay.
Madam Chair, let's just kind of wrap up the plan here. I do want to point out a couple of things. So Rick went through the roadway element. We do have the 10 million for the additional bike lanes from RTA 1 that was included. I do want to make a comment. I was approached by Carolyn Campbell about the wildlife linkages in RTA 1. And so I had committed to her that I'll look at that. We were originally programmed at about 45 million in the RTA 1 budget. We've identified a spend of about 26 million, not including Silver Bell, which is proposed. So I'm scrubbing those numbers as well. I'm not sure exactly how to address that. We did make that number 50 million going forward. But that does not address some of the challenges in the RTA 1. So I'm just letting you know that I'm still looking at that. I don't know what to do about it exactly, but
As I understand the request that she has had for us and others is to look at, again, not only making sure that we're appropriately including those corridors in RTA next, but that we include a plus up to go back and fix up what we did not address. Great.
that's correct. And at this point, that has not occurred. So I've got to scrub that and figure out if there's a way that we can address that. I wanted to mention that. Also, I wanted to identify for you down below in the transit element. In past conversations, we had not added the MOE. And just to refresh your memory, this was something that we passed out. It seems like months ago, but it was probably about 6 weeks ago where we talked about the MOE specifically from Pima County and from Marana. That equates to right at about $7.9 million a year. When you add that to the transit element, we're at almost $950 million of investment, which does include that 70 million from the federal government on the high capacity transit. The last thing I'll say on that is you can see on the spreadsheet, it's highlighted. We've got 92 million for the weekday, evening, weekend paratransit service. And then this is addition, and then 66 million additional in the express shuttle fixed and dial ride. So I just wanted to point those out.
I just wanted to make sure, because Sam, I know in the past, we had some concerns and questions that we were not accurately reflecting the city of Tucson's contributions and share of transit. Has that been modified correctly to ensure the city's participation correctly?
Yes, Madam Chair, the numbers look correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, then if there's no questions, we'll call it on the plan. I'd like to go ahead there. Thanks, Sam.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to make a note for project 34 under the safety ADA and active transportation element. We might suggest just changing the language to match the other two that are similar, the South Tucson safety and active transportation and the Pima County safety and active transportation elements, to just call that City of Tucson safety and active transportation elements. That way it's just consistent.
Just clear and consistent. Right?
We can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all.
So Madam Chair, if there's no other questions on the plan.
We can't spend any more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You guys are pretty good at spending and cutting too, by the way. But, so what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about the footnotes, and Tim had mentioned that early on. I want to talk about that because I think it's important, and it brings forth an opportunity. And so when we're talking about the policies, objectives, and procedures and the admin code, I think we can have a conversation around really getting into the specificity of how those dollars, those excess revenues, and I'm talking about the first one, which is the excess revenue. I'm actually suggesting that we put that language in the admin code up front so that there's clarity that the excess revenues, we've got a game plan for. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I have some language that I'll hand out. We're really taking a stab at the board, and you all had talked about, we'll call it flexibility language. Here you go, Tom. Flexibility language. Isa, if you could put up the flexibility language. We took a stab at it. It's up on the screen now. And so what I suggested is this language would actually be a footnote, which is a little longer than I'd hoped. So we're starting to get kind of long on the footnotes, but I'll give you a moment to take a look at it. I worked with the attorney to come up with this. She felt comfortable that this could address some of the concerns. If you could take a look at it and see what you think.
Terry, I see you, and I have a comment, but waiting for a second for. And Terry, I see, I think it's good. I think at the risk of making it even longer, but I think that part of it is, that's what we do. I can see some read this as the ability for the board to completely change things. And I don't know what's possible about, is there a way to say that this specific project could be modified in some way, or just to try to minimize it? Because I think I'm just looking at a campaign and I can see this one sentence becoming, or the entire campaign of, well, we're doing this, but then they can come back and do whatever the heck they want. So a little concerned about that. I'm going to go with Terry, Shane, then Tim. Mr. Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I actually have the same concern. And so I don't know if the language could be changed. I like it overall, but I'm wondering, because as it currently exists in states, let me get back to it here a minute. Due to changed circumstance, it becomes impractical to accomplish due to changed circumstances, or in the event there are insufficient funds available. So I think that is just too broad, and I'm wondering if it could be changed, and I don't like the word changed circumstances, but unforeseen circumstances beyond the control of the RTA, its governing board, blah, blah, blah. Because it could be a situation where the board changes and they just decide, you know what, it's the circumstances have changed because the board has changed and we changed our mind and we're going a different direction, or we want to. Some way to, I don't know if that wording that I gave is good or not, but some way to kind of rein that in a little bit so that it's more constraining. And I know that what we're trying to do is open this up and make it so it doesn't completely tie our hands, but I think this makes it so wide open that we could do virtually anything as it's currently written.
Thank you. Shane.
Yeah, I think Terry's comments were kind of getting to my initial concern in reading this. first off, isn't this already within the scope of authority for the RTA board? And we really are only talking about RTA funds. We're not talking about PAG funds here. So that's just a clarification. But at the end, Mike, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the goal? If you could simply state it in this, in putting language forward like this. Thanks.
Madam Chair, I don't believe that this is in the current statute because of the word rescope. I think the rescoping is something that is explicit in having to go to the voter, and that's why we're doing that on the RTA 1 projects. I think that the spirit and intent of this is to just give us as much flexibility, but retaining specificity for the voter where we don't have these concerns of the board can do anything they want. But I'm open to conversation. I mean, we kind of racked our brains on this. I'm not real happy about all the language here. I don't like the word impractical. I mean, that's pretty loose. I do like the unforeseen and beyond the control of the board. I think that's some good thoughts there, Terry. And by the way, we tried to make it as short as possible. We can make it longer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do, right? But it's huge. It's hugely critical.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just dive a little deeper than with Mike, is there a project that we can list as an example that if this kind of language was in place, we wouldn't have struggled as as an RTA group? Just so I get the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, I think North First is a good example of that. The board gave direction. This is the Ground Road to River. The board gave direction to proceed with that as a changed scope. But after reviewing that, it looks like that should have gone to, or that should go to the voter. And again, that's just an example. We can argue whether or not the board had the authority to do that at the time they were told they did, or I don't know, and it doesn't matter. But that's an example of how that could be interpreted here. So that's just one example.
And I don't know if it's necessary, and Tim, I'll call you one sec, whether we also need to kind of do anything to keep them within the categorical areas so that people don't think we're moving the wildlife or in some way just to do roads, or is there a way to keep percentages within the buckets over which we would not go back to the board or something?
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
that last statement
Yeah.
there,
With
stated goals of the
trying
RTA
to-
next plan. That's what I was trying to do there, was keep it so that you can't take it for something totally different. The spirit and intent is keep it within the plan. And the reason we use the word goals is because that's, kind of the underlying basis for what we're trying to do. But I like the idea of the elements. Maybe
Kind of
that's.
without more than an X% deviation from the aligned element or something. Tim, then Carmine, back to Shane. Oh, did you? Doesn't have, okay, no, I'm sorry. Tim, and then we'll go back to Christina.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So that Mike, you went straight to what my question was. What are the stated goals of the RTA next plan? Because all of this language hinges on you got to stay within those bounds, and defining those bounds would be critical to this conversation, regardless of what it says before that. And I think there's a whole matrix of goals, not just by element, but by jurisdiction, by any number of things. So I think that is if such a statement is to go into it, there's probably a 6-page document about that last sentence.
Let me.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Tim, so we could change the word goals to elements, if that would be better. Now, keep in mind that the document, the kind of companion document to this is the admin code. And that really gives us an opportunity to delve into, in a fair amount of detail, go through some of this. But again, what I'm trying to do is put something on the plan that gives future boards some flexibility, future boards and future staff some flexibility. But again, it's a tricky and a very slippery slope because of the specificity or lack of. But I don't disagree. It could easily delve into a lot of detail in terms of a plan. So.
Sam and I were talking about what the goals were as well. So glad that all three of us are on the same page, even though we're not in the same room. My concern is I would argue that the way this is written doesn't address First and definitely doesn't address Broadway. And so this sounds like impractical, likely due to funding challenges. Whereas, as I understand, and I wasn't here, both of those were led by the demands, the needs didn't materialize. And so I like that we're contemplating how do we allow some flexibility for the folks that are in the room and making the decisions for their agencies and to make the right decisions with the funding that's available and with an understanding of how the network is performing and the needs of the network. But I'm having a hard time seeing how First or Broadway would fit into this language.
Madam Chair, then Christina, what do you suggest, in terms of language? That's why I brought this here.
It's coming to the rescue.
Oh, great. Awesome. Thank you.
Wordsmith it. Thank you, Madam Chair. So to Christina's point, I think, and Mike, you just said something that kind of sparked an idea, is if we put in the footnote that and refer back to the administrative code, and then in the administrative code provide what those guardrails on, we might be able to define. We're trying to balance specificity and flexibility here, and so maybe we can identify some criteria or some reasons why the board might want to change the scope to a project, such as it doesn't meet the needs of the community in 15 years. The population wasn't met, the traffic demand's not there. Those are some of the reasons why we changed Broadway and we changed First Avenue, because it just didn't meet the original scope didn't align with the needs of our jurisdiction at the time. So that's my suggestion. I'm open to others.
And I'm wondering if perhaps the footnote is something as simple as the plan cannot be modified unless it is in accordance with administrative directive procedure, blah, 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 so that it's very short. But and the public statement is, we're not going to change this unless, but then there's a lot of specificity that we can delineate further in the plan, John.
A question about how much flexibility we want to talk about. Shane mentioned this only pertains to RTA funds, but we say available funds to pay. So that would be any funds, I would imagine. Do we want to limit it to the RTA funds that the board can modify, or are we talking about any funds available?
Madam Chair, John, my suggestion would be that it's RTA funding, because yeah, that's a good catch. Because I think that if we have a change in federal or state or some other source or impact fees, there's already a mechanism by which we can expand the scope if it's funded from those sources. We don't have to worry about that. So good catch.
Shane, have you been writing?
Thanks. I just wanted to comment on the, whether it was RTA or other funding. I think it has to be RTA because I don't think the RTA board has. I think the RTA is somewhat slave to PAG, not the other way around. And so if you're going to wrap in regional funding, I think that's a decision for the PAG council, not RTA. So thanks. As I understand it, anyway. Thank you.
And Carmine?
Madam Chair, maybe minor relative to the other comments, but where it says board, maybe indicating RTA board in every instance so that there's no confusion. The second to the last sentence just says by the board so that there's not confusion with the Board of Supervisors.
Or PAG. Or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, thank you. I I don't think we're going to wordsmith it at a committee. Do you have a sense of the group?
No.
Is there something we can work with? And if something gets drafted, happy if you're flipping things out, we will all respond and get back to you without violating open meeting law, but to help. I think maybe, as we said, shorter in a footnote, expanded in the actual document.
But we'll come up with something. But Madam Chair, what we'll do is, I think the comments are excellent. I appreciate it. What we'll do is I'm going to focus on, I like the term unforeseen. I think that's good. Beyond the control of the board. That's good. We'll include that somehow. I like the thought of changes to the needs or demand. I think that's a good idea. I'll think of how to put that in. It's almost like a changed condition, which is good. Tim, I liked your thought. Maybe we're explicit about the elements, because keep in mind that although this is more project scope related, or at least thought, it also is the intent of the element as a whole. And so we got to keep that in mind. The intent was to try to do both. And then we'll think through how to put this language and reference the admin code. We got a lot writing on that admin code.
Yeah. Tim?
Thanks. I just want to also just echo what you just said, Mike, about the element by element, because we sometimes are so obsessed with the projects that we lose sight of that there's much more to this than just the projects. And
Right. That's what I think was, maybe if there's a not to exceed X% or something within the elements. Because I think that's part of the concern we've heard previously, that things were, money was moved from other elements to complete roads. We'd like to get that. And again.
Yeah, Madam Chair, and Mike, to that, intent, if we look at land use, so I think most of us are familiar with entitlements, that if there's a substantial change and it's defined, so if it's like a 10% change in density, if you're varying design criteria, if you're not meeting a specific condition. So I think there may be some basis in land use that we can draw from in defining what that criteria looks like.
Thank you. Okay. Got it? Okay.
So, Madam Chair, team, I don't think we've got anything else at this point. Is that correct?
Help me
On the plan piece? Oh, go ahead. I'm
Well,
sorry.
we have the two footnotes, right? Excess revenue piece and then the flexibility piece are the two.
Yep.
Carmine, then Shane.
Madam Chair, can I go backwards just 1 second? So in line with what Sam requested on the City of Tucson safety project change, line number 37 is Pima County Green Valley projects. Just for overall consistency, if that were to read Green Valley Safety and Active Transportation Element Projects.
Yeah.
So then that way they're all listed the same way in that section. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane.
So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So if the goal of this language, Mike, is to, is to create flexibility for the RTA board in addressing, new needs that weren't contemplated or fully understood when the original plan was created, which is completely reality, right? We all know that over 20 years things are going to change and needs are going to change. Rather than a policy draft that focus on specific projects, keeping it at the element level, just recognizing that those needs change or unforeseens happen, seems to me to be the greatest flexibility for the board. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I just wanted to put that on the table. I think when we drive down into, at the project level, it can get a little more subjective instead of objective. And I think if we just keep the language at the element level, recognizing that things change over a 20-year period and create flexibility for the RTA board, I think that's where the magic happens. That's the sweet spot. Thanks.
But we would still have to specify that some way in the code language, right? That we would have complete flexibility, if you will, within the element. Thank you.
Yes.
Good one.
Okay, so I think I've got that. We'll take a stab at it, and I'll shoot that back out. What I would suggest is, I'll send it to you, and if you have comments, get those comments back individually, and then we'll just try to incorporate them as best we can. But we'll wordsmith this some more and go from there. So back to Jan, what you'd mentioned, what I'd like to do is just quickly go through this, just a summary of some of the things that we're going to be looking for. So your homework, please take a look at this one last time. Make sure that the project budget amounts, the non-RTA money columns, and the project descriptions are all correct. Also confirm the periods as well. Make sure that we didn't miss something, or that we included something that you all want changed. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we'll look at an additional 5 million. I'll figure out how to add 5 million to the Sonoran corridor, not affecting the city of Tucson. Number eight, Sam, you had mentioned that there's a concern about the dollars. You're going to let us know on that. Number 10, Carmine, you'll let us know on that in terms of the local match. You'll let us know on 10, 18, 21, and 22, Carmine. Is that correct? Okay. I do want to also point out again, the Colossal Cave and Marianne Cleveland Way, we moved those up to periods 2 and 3 from 3 and 4. So I think we addressed some of the concerns there. Then on the safety category, 34, we'll change that to safety and active transportation, the language that you had suggested, Sam. And then 37 is Pima County, Green Valley Safety and Active. Taking out Pima County. Are we taking that out? I thought it was just whatever the language is on the Green Valley. Did you want us to take out Pima County or just add safety?
No, sir. Add safety and active transportation element.
Confirm with the Pasquayaki tribe the Grant UP scope and schedule for that. We'll have that conversation. And then with regard to the footnotes, my suggestion is that we really hammer both of those footnotes in a lot of detail in the admin code, but that we include them somehow on the plan as well. So I'll come up with some language, or we'll come up with some language that will give us that kind of high level information on the plan, up to and including potentially referencing the admin code. I think that was a suggestion somebody made. I think that's a great idea. We'll reference the admin code in the plan. That gives us an opportunity to do that. We go ahead and I'll talk about schedule.
Thank you. I think I'd like to intentionally rumble with a difficult topic. I think as a potential policy discussion, I'm not privy to all the details on the journey that the city of Tucson has experienced over the years in delivering various projects. We recognize as a region that that we fell short of revenue forecasts and projections. There's a lot of other reasons why project delivery could have been delayed or hindered in whatever reason, whatever way. But I wonder if we ought to intentionally have policy that identifies a clear path, that if a member agency is wrestling with whatever it is, whether it's supply chain issues, whether it's struggles in coordinating a project, getting it across the finish line with, RTA staff, whether it's a budget issue, whatever it is, that there's a clear path for a member agency to elevate that issue to the board, quickly so that we can, we can work through whatever the issue is as a region and, and hopefully, help get these projects across the finish line. I say that in the, really in the spirit of cooperation. But for as many projects as we have on the table that we weren't able to deliver as a region, and the back and forth conversations that I've been privy to just at the TMC level and listening to the board conversations, I think we have to hold ourselves accountable for delivering projects as member agencies. However, if there are issues that are outside of our control as an agency, I think we need to intentionally have policy that helps air those issues as a region, so that as a region, we can come to the table and help each other get across the finish line. So I know that could be potentially an uncomfortable conversation to have, but if our intent as a region is to learn from the past 20 years, I think we would be remiss if we didn't intentionally develop some kind of policy that helps us deliver projects. Thank you.
We addressed this going into the next element. One was the development of sort of the SWAT team, that we would have a group that we would be able to continue to work with our partner jurisdictions as we saw programs becoming problematic slightly, but if that were to occur. We also discussed sort of the right of first refusal, if it will. So if the project was lining up to go to a jurisdiction, the jurisdiction was not ready for some reason, then that jurisdiction could indicate a willingness to step aside for a moment and let someone move ahead. So there are a lot of ideas that I think this TMC has talked about over the last couple of years about those concepts. And I think now, I know Jim's just passed out some documents that we're hoping, Shane, to make sure that we have documented them as we move forward in the code.
So, Madam Chair, I'm going to make the assumption that the planned conversation is over. This is kind of the next part of this, if that's okay. So we have been working on the policies and the admin code, and I'm gonna deviate a little bit from my normal, conversation around as the RTA executive director and go back in my prior life, which I didn't think I would ever do. Shane, I think accountability is a great word. And unfortunately, when you are in a situation where it's just easier to let it fester as opposed to addressing it and escalating it or elevating it to the board, you end up with delays. And I will tell you from experience that it becomes extremely frustrating as an implementer, if you will, when you are hamstrung and there's not an attitude of cooperation and facilitation. And so what I've suggested to you, without airing dirty laundry necessarily, is I think there's tremendous opportunity for us to improve that. And that's why I've now in my new role, fast forward, I'll put my other hat on now, my new hat. I've committed to establishing a facilitation role. Now, I will tell you that it's been all hands on deck to get the plan accomplished, if you will, and to this point, which, by the way, we're extremely proud of and excited to be to this point. But there's still a lot of work to do. And I think that the generation, we'll call it the generation of a SWAT team to facilitate where we're going and how we're going to get there, is going to be key. And I think that, yes, the member agencies should be held accountable or should hold themselves accountable. But I also think the RTA as an entity needs to hold itself accountable in this conversation. And the only way to do that is with clarity on what the steps are. and what happens when there is a disagreement or when there is lack of progress, and how does that work? And I think that there's an opportunity for us both in terms of the admin code, but also in terms of the policies, objectives, and procedures. And so what I've tasked the staff with is the writing it down, quite frankly, is the easy part. The harder part is how do we implement? What does it physically look like? And that's, we'll call it phase 2 of this conversation, which is how do we organize ourselves around that so that we can then move this forward and we're not sitting here wondering what happened and why we didn't get certain projects done. And then it's an opportunity to bring that accountability to the board and say, okay, board, we're struggling here, and here are some things that need to happen. And I will tell you that has never happened. Right, wrong, or indifferent, doesn't matter why. And I think that is an opportunity that was never explored. And I think had that happened, there could have been some movement on some of those projects that had otherwise been delayed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Shane.
Thank you, Mike. Madam Chair, Mike, this last point about regional accountability in delivering projects and how our administrative code or policies can best set the stage for that to occur, given the experiences that the city of Tucson has had, the challenges in right, wrong, or indifferent in working with staff and whatever. I think those are going to be that's going to be huge in terms of my mayor and council getting behind any policy that we get out in front of the of the public in March. So to whatever extent you can at least identify that this is on your radar, that at your next RTA board meeting, I think the better we're setting the stage for success. And I truly believe that what we need to have in place are policies that when conflict arise, it sets a very regiment process to escalate and elevate until we find resolution, and that would include a discussion with the RTA board. If it can't be resolved between an agency and RTA staff, then there's got to be a built-in release to get that conversation elevated. Because I agree with some of the previous conversations and ideas. Honestly, if an agency for whatever reason is not in a position to advance a project, then we need to open that up for other projects to get done until that project can occur. So instead of just holding everything up, it creates bottlenecks and problems for the entire region, and that so it has to be kind of a two-part. We've got to allow those monies to open up and get other projects done that are of regional significance and importance. And we have to, by design, create an escalation plan, conflict resolution, whatever you want to call it, so that an agency isn't held hostage for things outside of its control. And we just need to be able to have those conversations. And so I think if that's on your radar and that's shared with the board when you next meet with them, and they know that you're working on something, at some point in time, they're going to see a policy that that tries to address this issue. I think that's going to really resonate well, especially with my mayor. Thanks.
So, Madam Chair, thank you, Shane. It is definitely on my radar. I hear that, I think, from you and your mayor every time I chat with you all. So I appreciate the reminder on that. I don't want to spend too much time on the policies right this minute, but Jim did hand out, and we'll email it out. I don't know that we've emailed this out. We'll email out Shane, Terry, everybody that's online. But basically, it's an outline of where we're headed with regard to the policies and some suggestions, kind of really high level. We will add language, Shane, specifically with what you just outlined. I mean, we're going to add language in the code, but this outline will include that so that when we hand it to the board, they will see that. And I think we'll be ready to roll. That's all, Madam Chair.
And I think, and in the document Jim has passed out, you'll notice, I think we're looking to convene that policy subcommittee, and we're looking for Tucson, Marana, Oro Valley, a couple of jurisdictions to identify who that individual is. So we'll let one of you, Jim or Michael, know who it is so we can get that convened. Anything for today? Anything else for today? One last look at everybody's hands, make sure we get everybody online. Alrighty, thank you all.
All right, thank you.